Welcome!
Welcome to the Omniverse of Nick and the finale to the two-parter What If Eric Matthews Survived. Before we get into it, be sure to check out the Omniverse's homepage where our channel mascot Omni will direct you to the Discord, all Google Docs, and everything else the Omniverse has to offer, along with smashing the like button, subscribing to the Omniverse of Nick, sharing the Omniverse around and turning on all Omniversal notifications, along with commenting future requests and expectations in the comment section. With all that said, let's begin. We ended off last time with Jeff's game beginning and Mark Hoffman having to help out Jigsaw because no Amanda. And a mysterious pighead involved with Eric Matthews and Riggs and Art. But Jeff begins his game. And Lynn is trying to figure out what's all going on here, and her whole objective is to keep John alive. Mark says, game is simple. There's a man with a series of tests. If he passes his tests and there's no other strings and Lynn is able to keep John alive, she's free to go. But should she or Jeff fail, it's bad for everybody. But Jeff passes all his games and Lynn keeps John alive. But when Jeff gets in there, Lynn is not shot because, what reason would Mark have to shoot her? And John is still alive, but Jeff still has the gun because, stupid Jeff. But John says, you passed all your tests and made it this far. Now comes the final test to save both yourself and your wife. Should you forgive and forget this whole encounter ever happened, or give in to your vengeance and risk dire consequences? And Jeff is just all about making sure his wife's okay, and obviously she is okay because she wasn't shot, but he's still angry and is looking to shoot either John or Hoffman. But Hoffman says it's bad for everyone if he pulls that trigger. He should be glad that his wife is even alive and that he passed all his tests, even though he really kind of didn't. He's lucky to even have gotten this far. So he says, with one glare, do you really want to give in to vengeance or go down the path that your child and your wife wouldn't want you to? A darker road than you already have. Jeff just thinks about this infuriated because but he realizes that his wife's okay, he's okay, and really nothing has happened to them. So there's not a real need for him to shoot. He's still angry because Jeff and, his son and blah, 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 but he's not going to shoot this time. But there is still the prospect of his daughter. John says they must play one final game in order for Jeff to truly be free. But he feels that with this forgiveness, there's no need for that anymore. And he tells Mark to let their child go and let them free. Mark thinks about this for a second and is a bit perturbed by this, but John looks at him and says, do it, Mark. And Hoffman, he has no choice. He still respects John and obviously taken on his work and everything and is much more useful than Amanda ever was. So he lets their child go. And with that, Lynn, Jeff, and their kid, they all go home. And they run into Agent Strom, who escorts them out of the building, but then goes back in to see what happened and investigate further. Now, about the game with Eric Matthews and Art and Riggs, you might ask? Well, Riggs is still tested and goes through the exact same games as he did before. And then he gets to the point where he gets right at the end, but it takes him a little teensy little bit longer because of how a decent bit of the traps had to go because of rearrangement and, Mark and Amanda and everything. So when he gets and breaks through the door and is prepared to shoot Art, he sees the timer hits 0. And he's like, he doesn't even shoot because he's trying to figure out what happened. But right whenever the ice blocks are about to go down and smash Eric Matthews' head in, the chain releases. The trap releases. Eric Matthews jumps the best that he can because he's still weak, and he jumps down. And he's alive, barely making it before the ice blocks smash and, burst into nothingness, with shards falling on some of the people. Art is on the ground, still alive. Riggs, thankfully, he did not get shot. And even if he did get shot, he wouldn't have got shot fatally like Matthews did to him before. And now he's trying to figure out what's going on here until he sees there's one piece of this puzzle that has not been solved yet. The mysterious pighead who was in that electrical trap. He stands up, and everybody wants to know who this guy is. And he takes off the mask to reveal Dr. Gordon. Riggs cannot believe what he is looking at, and neither can Eric Matthews. And even Art is surprised by this. And he can't believe that Dr. Gordon, he's Jigsaw, or he's with Jigsaw. What's going on here? Dr. Gordon says there's far more to him than meets the eye. But considering that they passed the game, he will tell them. He had gotten out of there after busting his leg off, and he has been with John ever since. As a matter of fact, he has been a vital piece of the puzzle ever since the beginning. And thankfully, they actually passed their test. Otherwise, he would have been with them a lot longer. But he's not leaving John or Jigsaw or the legacy of what he's been through with these people just because they passed their game. All he does know is that now Eric Matthews can finally get away, and everybody else can. But Riggs is beginning to walk away and seemingly going to escort the likes of Matthews and Art away, but he turns back to Dr. Gordon and says, "How could you? How could you team with a psychopath like that? Matthews, after everything you had been put through, leaving Adam in the dust, leaving Matthews, how could you do this?" Dr. Gordon says, "You have no idea what I suffered that day. You think that I wanted to leave Adam behind in that bathroom? I had no choice. But John gave me a different semblance, a different motive, a different sense and purpose on life." And he turns one last time and says, "Who knows, you might even see me again one day, but be glad you lived through this and actually get to live to see another day." So, with that said, Riggs has no choice but to just let him go. They've all been through enough. And with that, Riggs, Matthews, and Art all get out of there. Meanwhile, Strom enters the building where he had escorted Jeff, Lynn, and their daughter out of to investigate. John eventually succumbs to the cancer in his bed without having his throat slit, and he passes away on his bed. But there was a tape just before he dies. He doesn't swallow the tape this time. He plays it, and right before he passes, just like he did with Jeff, except much more different, and it says the same thing to Mark that it did in canon about having him being untested and that the games have just begun. So Mark still traps Strom in. So pretty much the entire plan goes exactly the same, except the only difference is that Jeff gets out of there with Lynn, and, the kid was obviously still alive, and Riggs, Matthews, and Art are already out of there with Dr. Gordon. So when you think about it, this whole thing has gone almost exactly the same, except from only one perspective rather than two. And Mark gets the tape, and the entire rest of the Saw franchise comes together in the meeting with Mark and Dr. Gordon, ending up with Hoffman in the bathroom, fated to die just like Adam and almost just like himself. As for Matthews, he would reunite with his son, and they would have a lot of redemption and, you know, bonding to make up for. But Matthews, even he knows everything he had been through for that super long time, almost dying, especially to those ice traps. This game with John is far from over. And eventually, him and Riggs would come together for one last confrontation with Dr. Gordon, a possibly still alive Hoffman, and the end to the legacy of Jigsaw. So, we come to the end of another story. But this one, unlike the Adam one, had way more potential going for it. Because, unlike Adam, with him surviving in Saw, you'd think that Adam's story would have, done more. But with this one, Amanda's death, a movie essentially early, means major ramifications. Not only would Dr. Gordon have to be included more in, he would have to be revealed much sooner, but Hoffman would have to try harder, which would make Saw 3's and 4's traps infinitely worse. And despite Jeff, or, slow, you get the point. Jeff being Jeff. With Hoffman there, and different situations, and his wife not getting shot, I feel that would deter Jeff enough for them to all walk away. But with Jeff, it would be this close. And with poor preparation, or longer preparation needed without Amanda, and the fact that Dr. Gordon was included, this means that Riggs would get to the door in Saw 4 just the second as the timer pretty much releases them all from their traps. So Eric Matthews would come a centimeter off from losing his freaking head after he already lost his foot, which was probably one of the most brutal and unnecessary kills, and this story would spare him from that. And yeah, after that, Riggs and Matthews would be alive still, and they would be part of the story, but I feel that their characters would take a halt. You gotta think about this for a second. Eric Matthews lived through 2 to 4, and he was trapped like Dr. Gordon, except not as long. Dr. Gordon lost his foot, was gone for the entire franchise up until 8. Eric Matthews almost loses his foot. He was lucky to live for another few movies, but still end up dead, all because he couldn't wait to look for his son. So in a sense, him, Jeff, and Riggs all have one thing in common. They don't know how to be patient. But Eric Matthews killing Amanda saved his life. Because without Amanda and her test, halting the game of Jeff, Lynn, and causing different situations with Eric Matthews' eventual game, he wouldn't even realize that he would not only be saving his life, he would not only be saving Riggs' life, not just Art's life, but Lynn, Jeff, the kid, be saving a lot. And yes, I do still think that Strom would die, because you gotta think, after Strom is trapped, Riggs and obviously Jeff, Lynn, and them would be written out of the story, as many of the Saw victims had who, lived to tell the tale. But as for Riggs and Matthews, I think Riggs would finally learn to do what, his wife and so many others had said, and just let go. And Matthews, realizing he almost lost his freaking life, just centimeters off from getting his head freaking smashed, and killing Amanda, having his foot almost, completely torn off, he would have to get that thing amputated, and he'd basically be a second Dr. Gordon. But except under way different circumstances. All of which would force, by the time that Mark Hoffman kills Jigsaw's wife, it would just all come to an end. At that point, Dr. Gordon would make himself known once again and trap Hoffman in that room forever, but he wouldn't get far. Unlike the original, where we haven't got a conclusion to what happened to the two of them, this would make a conclusion. Matthews and Riggs would understand at that point they can't wait anymore. This provides them, after Jill Tucker's death, it basically provides them with the opening they needed. Yes, this is not all of them are being like Dr. Gordon, where they gotta oh, Tucker died, now we have to step in. It would just be out of instinct for the both of them. Because at this point, they had been going on so long, neither one of them turned to the side of Jigsaw. So they would encounter Dr. Gordon and do what they should have done in that trap in Saw 4's canon movie and kill Dr. Gordon, the one traitor amongst all of them. And then they would find Hoffman in that bathroom, and he would suffer the same fate that Adam and so many others at the hands of Jigsaw's men suffered through. And after that, besides what would go on to be future movies and flashbacks, the Saw franchise dies. All because Amanda died a movie sooner. That makes this an ultimately better ending. Unlike the Adam one, which had multiple scenarios, many of which could have resulted in either the same canon or just a better ending. But this, not only does it have major ramifications, but it actually has longer lasting ramifications. Whereas the first story, Adams, affected one movie, this would affect 3. The end of 2, 3, and then 4. And it would go on to most likely impact 5 for Strom at least a little bit. But by the time 5 even gets around, that is where it just ends. It goes up to canon up until Hoffman gets kidnapped and thrown into the bathroom. At that point, an ultimate climax would make that, what should have been explained with Hoffman and Gordon, something actually worth it. Which is honestly something that Matthew's character should have gotten. Maybe not so much Riggs, because he was basically just like Jeff. And Matthews definitely was like it too, except way more different because of the scenario. And as much as I had thought about having this as a Shield situation from the WWE, and having Matthews just turn on Riggs and join Dr. Gordon and Hoffman or whatever, or at least kill Hoffman, I felt that best as a spoiler alert for something I might do for him just surviving. But this was about him killing Amanda and seeing where the road leads him from there. And I wanted to focus on him as much as humanly possible, even if I threw a lot of other major things into the mix. But sometimes even a story about one character still has to have the other characters matter to make the whole thing come together. So I hope you enjoyed this second Saw story on the channel, and stay tuned for more Saw and more ongoing things, stories, and tales. And stay tuned, hyped, and packed for the ongoing Omniverse of Nick.
Now get out!
What?
Get out! Everybody get out!